to protect human rights. And Professor Ramcharan, who comes with such a long list of distinctions that it's embarrassing to even attempt to begin to list them. But among them is the fact that he's currently Chancellor of the University of Guyana. He's a visiting professor at the moment, I think up until this evening when he jets off, no doubt somewhere else. He is the former Deputy and Acting United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. And so I think I can scarcely think of anybody else more suited to kick off this conference and tell us about the broadest perspective. And our later speakers will gradually focus more directly on the specific right. And I'll say a bit more about them when they get to their feet. Professor Ramcharan.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for a very kind introduction. Second, I prefer to stand because I've been sitting all morning and with my students, and I'll have to sit again this afternoon. And so standing will give me a chance to revitalize myself. So, third, let me say to you that as I think about today's subject, I'm thinking about the historical journey of humankind for law and for justice. And I want to ask you to hold this in your mind. There is a book written by a man, a historian, some while back. His name is Herbert Muller, and the title of the book is Freedom in the Ancient World. And in this book, Herbert Muller tells the story of the quest of societies everywhere, the world over, to develop systems of law and to develop systems of justice. And so the first thought that I would ask you to keep in mind is humanity's quest for law and for justice. And I'd like to say to you that this is shared in many parts of the world. Madam Chair, last year I published a book called Contemporary Human Rights Ideas, and as this is not to show off the book or to invite you to buy it, it's to link up with this story. It's a discussion of the key human rights ideas in our world today. And when I finished, when I submitted the manuscript of this book, the publishers asked me if I would do a historical chapter on the emergence of the idea of rights. And when I researched this, apart from Herbert Muller's presentation of humanity's quest for law and justice, I looked at things like the Code of Hammurabi, the Egyptian Code of the Dead, and the reason I showed you the book is this is a cylinder of Cyrus, the emperor, when he entered Babylon. And the publishers, at my request, went to the British Museum and took a photograph of the cylinder. And when Shirin Ebadi received the Nobel Peace Prize some years ago, she asked that the proclamation of Cyrus be considered one of the earliest human rights declarations in the world. And this is what Cyrus had to say. I actually am very fond of this. That's why I put it on the cover of the book. Okay. And the point that I seek to elucidate, and where I want to go, is that the quest of humankind for law and justice and rights is a shared quest. I argue in the book for what I call the rolling history perspective of the idea of rights. Namely that different societies at different times have contributed to this quest for rights that will culminate in the Universal Declaration. And you in China, in Chinese philosophy, you have contributed to this in a major way too. So the idea that this is some foreign thing is not historically tenable. So now, some people say, some Westerners think that they created the origin of rights. They created rights. But there was Cyrus, let us say, in the year 539 before the contemporary era, and he declared, I undertake to honor the religion and custom of all nations under my kingdom. I shall never impose my kingdom to any nation. I shall not allow anyone to oppress another. I shall not allow anyone to dispossess others' property by force or take it without consideration or satisfaction of their own. I shall not allow anyone to use force or unpaid labor. Everybody is free to choose any religion he believes in. Everybody is responsible for himself. I shall not allow any man or woman to be sold as a slave. This custom shall be totally abolished throughout the world. Well, some of you who are historians might say to me, well, maybe it was not that significant. But the fact is that he was talking about what we call rights today. I'd like to give this to you.
Thank you.
So now, humanity's quest for law and justice, and so that culminates with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. And in case, I said this when I gave a lecture here in November, there is a man, the Chinese representative at the time of the drafting of the Universal Declaration. His name is I only know him as Mr. P.C. Chang. He was a gifted diplomat and scholar. And when the Universal Declaration is drafted, Mr. Chang is saying, this is not a Western instrument. This is an instrument that has to draw from the philosophies and the cultures of people the world over. So I ask you to think, in my class right now, at this university, which is a class on the national protection of human rights, I have some 18 students, and they're looking, I will not go into technicalities, they're looking at pertinent documents of the United Nations with a view to making a critical assessment of the national protection of human rights in a country of their choice. And just before I came here, I asked them, what do you think of this process of looking at the national protection system of countries? And their answer to me was, it's not perfect. One of them said it's even Harry Potter. But they said, at least it is a start. And I want to ask you to hold in your mind's eye the concept of humanity's quest for law and justice, humanity's quest for what we call rights today. I want to ask you to keep in mind the contributions of Mr. Chang. I said in my lecture, and I say to you, and I hope that one of you young Turks, or one of the female equivalent of Turk is, I hope that one of you will go and take the historical record and do a research essay or a dissertation on Mr. Chang and his contribution to the drafting of the Universal Declaration. So then we have this great synthesis, which is the Universal Declaration. I have among my papers the first statement ever made by the People's Republic of China on human rights in the United Nations in 1977. And at that time, it is feeling its way. It has just come to the seat at the United Nations. It is taking a very careful position. And then now, earlier this year, China submitted a report to the United Nations Human Rights Council under a procedure called the Universal Periodic Report, in which all countries in a 5-year period are expected to say what they're doing to give effect to internationally recognized human rights.